Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Harry climbed the long and winding staircases back to Gryffindor Tower. He got to dinner late that evening, and Ron and Hermione already left to get a jump start on their weekend homework. Though, Ron left rather reluctantly. "You're a prefect now. You need to set a good example," said Hermione sharply. "I'd rather eat a good meal," said Ron, grumbling. "You've been in here for an hour," said Hermione, with a roll of her eyes. "Doesn't mean I've got my fill," said Ron with a pout. "There's still a good half a pie sitting there." Harry was relishing the peace and quiet that was left to him as he sat and ate his meal in solitude. All their fighting and bickering about prefect duties was wearing thin on his nerves. He was already stressed to the max, and they weren't helping matters. He wished that he had a proper vacation. He wasn't able to even get help to deal with the horrors from the third task. He got home and was ordered to keep out of the way of his aunt and uncle. His friends didn't help matters with their lacking letters to him and their slightly teasing remarks about what was going on. He still hadn't forgiven them for leaving him in the dark, and Sirius and Dumbledore were no better in his eyes. He had written several letters to his godfather and to Dumbledore, letters pleading with them to come and get him, or to come and talk to him at least. That only applied to Dumbledore. He didn't want to lose Sirius, but Dumbledore never responded to him, and Sirius only told him that they'd have a nice talk the next time they saw each other. And when they did see each other, Sirius couldn't remember the conversation. So this peace and quiet was a blessing, to just leave him to his thoughts and without the temptation of shouting at his two friends. He didn't see the eyes focusing squarely on him and sending quick glances down to another table. He had no idea about the plot that was brewing. Once he had taken his time enjoying his treacle, he walked swiftly down the deserted corridors, past the gossiping pictures and the ancient statues, wishing to get to Gryffindor Tower soon. He was tired and wanted to go straight to sleep. Hopefully he didn't have any nightmares to keep him awake, and thankfully he didn't have any homework left to work on. He turned down one of the more uninhabited corridors. The paintings in this hallway were all scenery and landscapes, and the statues were that of an assortment of magical creatures. It was a pleasant change from the clanking armors and the chatty portraits. Suddenly, as he turned a corner, he was slammed against the wall by a blast of red light, knocking him out instantly as his head crashed into stone. He slowly fell to the floor and fell face first onto the cold stone floor. As he lay there, 4 people emerged from the shadows and sneered down at the unconscious boy. "What do we do now, Professor?" asked a blonde teenager, with a malevolent glint in his eye as he looked down at the unconscious figure. "Are we going to lock him in the dungeons for a while?" "That fool of a headmaster would send the ghosts out to search and find him the moment he doesn't show in the common room. He'd be found too quickly. But I know just the thing. You two, grab him," said a toad-faced woman, turning on her heel and strutted down the corridor with the blonde-haired boy behind her and the 2 boys carrying an unconscious Harry. She took him down to the deepest part of the dungeons, even past the potions classroom and the entrance to the Slytherin common room. She walked towards a dead-end corridor that not even Draco had traveled down before, torches lining the bare walls, and towards the only painting in the area. It was a large U-framed painting, saturated in browns, grays, and red. There were men poised and ready to strike with their weapons, while what looked like monsters were baring their teeth and fingering their own cruel blades. Strangely, unlike all the other pictures in the school and magical world, these figures were stationary, frozen in time. Umbridge waved her hand over the gruesome-looking battle painting filled with bloodlust and loss of life. The oils and figures began to swirl, the distorting on itself, and a low moan emitted from the canvas. "Shove him through," said Umbridge with a haughty smile. "What is it?" asked Draco, looking for some reason, uneasy instead of his normal sneering self. "It used to be a way for the ministry used to use to punish those who stood against it when the courts were incapable of seeing their own nose at the end of their face. You'll see what it does," said Umbridge with the same smile. "It hasn't been used in a long while," she added, looking fondly at the swirling colors. "What's it doing here?" he asked quickly, before his lackeys could throw the unsuspecting Gryffindor in the painting. "Phineas Legolas placed it here many years ago when he was headmaster, and a fine one he was too," said Umbridge with a smirk. "Never questioned authority or his superiors. He left it here to protect it from the people who would have it destroyed." That man had sense about him. Can't say the same thing for the current ones, she finished with a frown. I found it when I was here, and I always wanted to use it on someone. Crabbe and Goyle lifted the limp figure up into the air and threw him into the wall containing the painting. As soon as he went through, he came back out again, as if his body was doing a U-turn. But as he came out, Draco and his goons noticed that he didn't come out the same way he came out. It was like he himself had been through the war that took place amongst the oils. He was bloodied, bruised, and worn, and he fell limply to the ground. Now we leave him. A few floors away, though, can't risk losing this painting, said Umbridge, smugly. This time, she magicked him onto a stretcher and levitated him up the stairs. Draco looked back at the painting with a look of horror on his face. He could now see what looked like Potter's face. Amongst the warriors and wielding a blood-stained sword, the strangest thing was he now had a sparkling crown on his head. At around 3 o'clock the next morning, Dumbledore hurried down to the hospital wing with a worried, disheveled Professor McGonagall leading the way. It took some doing to wake the headmaster up, as he had been taking some strong sleeping draughts of late, on Madame Pomfrey's orders due to all the stress that he had been undergoing. The last thing you need is a heart attack, Albus. These should help you sleep a little easier, said Madame Pomfrey at the start of the year. I'm all right, Poppy, said Albus, looking over to his colleague through his half-opened eyes. You will be... once you have a good night's rest every night, said Pomfrey. Minerva, are you ever going to tell me what is going on? What is troubling you? Said Dumbledore with a small smile, striding effortlessly after her. He had to admit he was feeling a bit better since he's been sleeping at night. It's Potter, Albus, said McGonagall as they entered the hospital wing. We found him on the 6th floor, hidden behind the statue of Icar the Incomparable just a few moments ago, but he won't wake up no matter what we try. Dumbledore followed his deputy over to the bed, which cradled an unconscious Harry Potter. He was being covered in bandages and spells silently being cast over him by both Madame Pomfrey and Snape. He was pale, obviously injured, and what looked like lifeless. What on earth happened to him? Said Dumbledore, only his eyes betraying the shock he felt. He stared at the boy until he saw his chest rise and fall, not allowing his own breath to escape his chest. We don't know, but I do know that he never made it to the dormitories last night. I had the rest of the staff, except for that vile woman, help me in searching the school. I even asked the ghosts for aid. Remus and Alastor also came to help me find him, said McGonagall, pointing to the two men that stood beside the bed. They were down at Hogsmeade for the evening, thankfully. Why did you tell me? Asked Dumbledore, his voice almost cracking with worry as he walked over and caressed the boy's cheek. I could have helped you look. Why did no one rouse me? No offense meant, Albus, but you've been distancing yourself from him. I didn't think you wished to help in the search. You certainly weren't all that concerned when I told you about Potter's unfair banishment from Quidditch, said McGonagall sharply. I can never abandon him, said Dumbledore sharply. I was protecting him. Keeping him away from you is protecting him. You must be out of your mind, said Madame Pomfrey shortly as she wrapped Harry's legs tightly in gauze. The safest place for anyone is near you. I've been telling him that for months, said Remus with a growl, holding Harry's limp hand in his own, rubbing the top of the boy's hand with his thumb, desperately hoping that the touch would revive the lad. All day, Madame Pomfrey, Dumbledore, and Professor Snape tried everything they could possibly think of to try and wake the boy up. Nothing worked. He was dead to the world, and his cuts were not healing. They couldn't even stop the blood flowing freely down from his wounds and onto the white sheets. All they could do was force blood-replenishing potions down his throat and keep on trying. They called Ron and Hermione down, interrogating them gently about where he went currently. They couldn't answer or even lend a helping hand with their recounts of the night before. We don't know, said Hermione tearfully. He was still in the Great Hall when we left him, said Ron. Then whatever happened to him last night was right after dinner, said Snape with a calculating look at Harry. Who could have done this? Said Madame Hooch, looking down at the poor boy. Only one person could this, growled Hermione almost viciously. Miss Granger? You don't mean you-know-who? Said Professor Flitwick with a squeak. Not him. He would have taken the child out of here. Potter would be dead if he was the one, said Professor Snape. Harry could have fought back, said Ron defensively. Not likely, spat Snape. The Dark Lord wouldn't just run away from the injured Harry Potter. He'd take him or end his life, leaving the body for the headmaster to stumble across. Harry could have wounded him, said Hermione frantically. Again, not likely, said Snape with a sneer. Only Dumbledore has the power to wound the Dark Lord. But, said Ron, we are 3 children, please be silent, said Dumbledore shortly, his patience reaching its end for the first time in 2 years. All three of them turned and looked shocked, yet insulted at the headmaster. This is not helping. There is no right answer, Severus. Tom most surely could have done this, just to hurt me. I was a fool to think that I could rewrite Harry's and my connection with each other over the course of a few months. The lingering feelings would still be inside his mind. Only now, I replaced trust with hurt and betrayal. I only gave Voldemort a greater weapon, said Dumbledore, his hands gripping the metal bar at the foot of Harry's bed tightly. I'm sorry, Harry. A tear began to fall down his face. I'm so sorry. The others stared. For Dumbledore to show this much weakness, he must have been shocked to the core. Arguing and feeling sorry for ourselves isn't going to fix anything, said McGonagall shortly, yet patting Dumbledore's arm softly. Potter is still alive, however fleeting that may be. We need to help him. Quite right, Minerva, said Professor Sprout. But the question is, what do we do? Several days later, there was no change in Harry. He was still unconscious, and he was still bleeding from his unhealed wounds. Dumbledore and Madame Pomfrey summoned the best healing minds in Europe to come and look at Harry, but it was no use. They had no idea either. I still say that we should take him to St. Mungo's, said one of the healers. I'm afraid that is not possible. The Ministry has deemed him unbalanced. They would keep him and stick him in their mental ward, said Dumbledore quickly. I just did a mental scan of him. He's fine. He's the picture of mental health, said another healer as he put his wand away. He has no mental scarring, horrifying trauma, and a moderate touch of depression, yes. But other than that, his mind is perfect. Yes, I know. But the Ministry isn't, said Dumbledore, though he was a little taken aback by the revelation of depression. Never was, muttered the oldest healer there as he sat beside the bed, looking at the boy fixedly from his chair. So what do we do? I'm at a loss for what could be the cause of the boy's sudden comatose state, said another healer. Letting the public know about the boy's condition would only make matters worse. I'm afraid, said the older healer. Especially with who he is. Don't need some half-cocked youngsters going about thinking that it's his mind snapping. Sometimes the young ones speak the words of wisdom, said Dumbledore absently. But no, you are right. Bringing them into the fold might not be the best choice. I'm sorry, Albus, but we are learning nothing, nor are we figuring out anything. All we can say is to let him rest. Away from all the hustle and bustle of a school and the constant visitation by the students, said the older healer who seemed to be the leader of this small band. I understand, thank you. All of you, said Dumbledore sadly. If we think of something, Albus, we'll tell you, said another healer, clasping his hand. They all took their leave, discussing further what could have plagued the boy as they left. Lupin stood beside the bed and wept silently, looking as if his whole world had collapsed. Dumbledore snapped his fingers, and Fawkes appeared in a whirl of fire. Remus, take a hold of Fawkes and take Harry to Grimmauld Place. He can rest there. Sirius won't take his eyes off him if I know him at all, said Dumbledore weakly. Are you all right, Albus? Said McGonagall, walking up to him carefully. No, I'm not used to being in the dark about something. It frightens me, he said in a whisper. He turned and looked at Remus, who was still standing in place. Remus, take Harry. Get him out of here. This school is not safe for him anymore. If someone could cause him this much damage to him. Lupin slowly picked Harry up bridal style and with some doing took a hold of Fawkes's feathers, and the three of them disappeared. Albus, said McGonagall fretfully. I failed him. I couldn't protect him, even when I was 600 feet away, said Dumbledore, tears streaming down his face. Harry groaned and opened his eyes slowly. He found himself waking up in a shady forest. There was nobody near him. He looked up, seeing the sky partially blocked by the trees around him. He took a deep breath, and he smelled. Clean air, he said thoughtfully. Cleaner than I've ever breathed. I'm nowhere near London at least, and this place doesn't smell like the dark forest. What the hell happened? He looked down. And where did my clothes go? He was standing alone in the middle of a forest, stark naked. Harry walked deeper into the woods, not knowing how he got there and how he was going to get back home. He could vaguely remember the feeling of someone throwing him into the air, and then he landed hard onto the grassy ground. But other than that, he had no idea. He debated with the idea of just staying put and waiting for someone to come and find him. But if he had gone this far, laying in the middle of a bunch of woods, then perhaps he should find his own way home. This bit of forest didn't seem familiar to him. Either he was really deep into the Forbidden Forest, or he was somewhere completely different. Besides, the only ones that would know where to look for him would be the people that sent him here. If this was a student prank done by the Slytherins, then he'd have to wait quite a bit for someone to come and fetch him, be it Hagrid, perhaps a member of the Order, or McGonagall. If it was going to be McGonagall, he'd better find something to cover himself up with. But if no one was coming to get him, getting back to Hogwarts was his main prerogative. But first things first, after all, he needed clothes, or at least something to cover up his lower regions. He couldn't go back to Hogwarts without anything on or rescued in such a condition. McGonagall alone would skin him alive. This had to be a Slytherin prank. At least he sort of hoped it was. That meant that Hogwarts wasn't too far off then. He wandered deeper into the woods, now uncaring if someone would see him. What could he do? It was unavoidable. If someone were to come by, and that was the worst case scenario. If he was indeed far away from Hogwarts, he would just ask politely, while hiding behind a tree or hiding in a bush, of course, if he could borrow a set of clothes. Though, and provided he was in the Forbidden Forest, he couldn't quite see someone being here that didn't already live here. He didn't know of any wizards that just happened to pass through the Forbidden Forest just to go for a walk, so someone passing by would mean he wasn't at Hogwarts anymore. Then again, if he still was at Hogwarts, then a centaur could come galloping by at any moment. Maybe they'd help him somehow. There wasn't any point in panicking and throwing a fit. No one was within shouting distance. He had already tried that and nearly shouted himself hoarse. He simply accepted the situation for all that it was worth. And the situation was, he was somewhere, he had no idea where, he didn't have a wand, it was nowhere to be found, anywhere nearby or in the surrounding area, had no food, no water, and no clothes. His situation was dire, and he had to come up with something really quickly. He knew that if someone was lost, the best thing was to stay in one place, but that rule pretty much only came in handy if he was camping with others, or someone back in civilization knew where he was. No one knew where he was, except his attackers, and he didn't figure they would be so willing to give up his location, so he was on his own. Slytherins were pretty good about not revealing their pranks and not giving in to teachers any information. He wandered about until he reached a clearing in the dense woods. His stomach then began to growl. Damn, he was hoping it would take a while for him to get hungry. It usually took him a longer time than this to get hungry. Clothes and food, then, my lists of needs, are getting longer by the second, he thought to himself with a grim smile. He didn't want to wait until he got to the castle, just in case it took him longer than a few hours. He was hoping with all his might that he was just in the Forbidden Forest, though. How he survived the night was beyond him, for with the sun out, night had passed him by. He looked around, well, he thought carefully. The only way to get both of the things I need quickly is by hunting or fishing. I don't want to wrap myself up in leaves, just in case I accidentally put some poison ivy on myself by accident. But it's going to be difficult without a weapon. I don't even have my wand. Indeed, he did not. He looked all around the area where he landed and couldn't find his only way of defense. He looked around for about a half hour and found a limb that had landed on the ground from the upper branches of a tree. He snapped the weaker branches off the stronger part of the fallen limb until he had what looked like a stout staff, a little knobby and bent, but close enough for his needs. He then looked around the ground and found a sharp-edged stone. This was the only good thing about all the television that Dudley had watched, especially that MacGyver marathon that was on the American channel they got for free. Harry learned a lot of pretty interesting tricks with simple things that when he showed Ron a few of them, Ron would insist that he used magic and not anything Muggles came up with. After much labor and a few choice words, after he cut his finger a few times with the stone, he made a nice wooden spear. Once again, it wouldn't win any beauty contests, but it was good enough. For all the trouble this thing is causing me, I'd better be stuck in here a while. If someone comes in 5 minutes, I'm going to be pissed, said Harry. I'm going to chase them about with this thing. He looked around, assuming he was still somewhere near the castle, or at the least on Earth, dreading the thought that he might be on some other planet due to a freak accident, or a messed up joke. He had to find some little furry creature to make a meal of. He had never had meat other than beef, chicken, pork, lamb, or fish. Farm-raised, he knew, but wild animals, this was new on him. He felt that a small rodent or something like that would be easier to take on than larger game like deer or bears. Bears, he didn't want to think of hunting that. He didn't know what to do if he were to run across that. Hopefully he was still in the Forbidden Forest. There were no bears in there, right? Suddenly, he looked to the right and he saw a deer. It was a young buck, just out trying his new antlers. Harry's eyes grew large. How the hell did he get to be so lucky? This was lucky for him on so many levels. and it gave him the perfect opportunity to practice with the spear and some familiar meat. Harry gripped his spear and hurled it. It missed by at least 7 feet too far right, and it had stuck itself firmly into the thick blackberry bush. The deer flinched, looked over quickly, and took off. So much for luck. Damn, right in the bushes, snarled Harry. He made to retrieve his spear, but a rustle in the bush caused him to stop dead in his tracks. Unsuspectingly, an enormous wild boar came snorting out of the bush. The spear that Harry had just thrown lodged itself in the rear of the boar. Harry could tell that the boar was not interested in hearing an apology. "Nice piggy," said Harry meekly. Suddenly the boar charged. Back at Grimmauld Place, Sirius covered the unconscious boy with a thick, fluffy quilt and ruffled the boy's untamed hair. "How could this have happened?" asked Sirius fretfully. "He was at Hogwarts. He was being watched." "We are unsure, but we hope to finding the cause," said Dumbledore sadly. "But not before we find the cure to whatever ails him." "I still say that Umbridge did it," said Remus angrily. "You think she's behind everything?" said Sirius impatient. "I swear if we gave the chance, you'd say she was behind the assassination of the Armenian Minister of Magic." "She's evil," said Remus almost shouting. "You know what she's like?" "I agree, but you say she's behind almost every crime in existence," said Sirius, patting his shoulder, but still keeping a hand in Harry's hair. "We don't have any proof, but really, is she that stupid to hex Harry with Dumbledore so close? I agree with the kids. I say Voldemort is behind this." "I am still undecided," said Dumbledore quietly. "I'm going to find the cure first, and then I will focus my attention on who did it. And Merlin help them when I catch them." His voice grew cold. Sirius and Remus leaned back slightly, but then something caught Remus's eye. "Wait a tick, what's up with Harry's fingers?" asked Remus, looking down at Harry's hands. They all looked down and saw blood coming from his digits. Dumbledore took Harry's hand gently and examined it. There were lacerations appearing suddenly, as if an invisible knife was cutting into Harry's flesh right before his eyes. "He somehow got a cut several times, but I don't know how," he said in shock. "How could he have been cut? He's been wrapped up in bloody blankets the entire time," said Sirius. "I do not know. Look, even more cuts and gashes are showing up," said Dumbledore, still shocked. "What the hell is going on?" said Sirius worriedly. They hurried to try and heal the cuts and gashes on the poor boy's body. Harry dodged the boar another time, but the boar's tusks grazed his arm sharply, tearing at the flesh. He looked around frantically, trying to find a means of escape. Every time he tried to turn his back on the ferocious beast, the boar would come and attempt to knock him over and gore him with his horrible tusks. Harry looked around, something he can use to defend himself with, but the only thing he could possibly see that would help him out in any way was the spear he had made. The trouble is, it was still lodged in the boar's rump. He had to do something to get it back. He dodged the boar once more, but when he got to his feet, he picked up a handful of earth. When the boar came back again, he tossed the dirt into the boar's eyes. He jumped to the side and held onto spear as the boar thrashed about. Finally, the spear was ripped from the body of the boar's hide. Harry took several steps back from the boar and readied himself. In a hurried blur, it was all over. The boar was on the ground, bleeding from the stab wound Harry gave it in the throat, and the beast was quickly dying. Harry fell to the ground, weakly, and took several deep breaths. He looked at his arms and legs and saw the wounds he had received. He tried to staunch the bleeding with leaves from the tree above him. Thankfully, none of the wounds were all that deep, which was amazing luck. After a while, the bleeding had stopped, and Harry looked down at his fallen foe. "Well, now that's over, but what do I do now?" gasped Harry, scratching his head. "How do I get what I need? I don't have a knife." He looked down at the ground and saw the same rock he used to make the spear. It had formed several sharpened edges, but one end seemed most prominent. Most of the wounds on his fingers came from that edge. "That'll do," he said with a smirk. "But I need a moment to catch my breath." Once he recovered a little, he picked up the rock. It was some time later, quite a few hours, that Harry managed to get most of the hide taken off the boar and some of the meat. It wasn't the best cuts or even a remotely clean field dressing, but it was enough to last him a day or so if he was stuck in this forest for a while. He cut 2 holes on either side of the wider parts of the creature, gutted it, washed it in the nearby stream, and slipped his slender frame through the holes. He He grabbed a thin vine and wrapped it around himself several times. The thing felt coarse, sticky, and smelled awful, but it was the best that fate had to offer. Note to self, wash this thing daily. Next, I'm going to need some water and a fire to cook this meat. Last thing I need is to get sick from this stuff, thought Harry. Harry closed his eyes and listened hard to the surrounding woods. He could hear running water to the left of him. That solves that problem, but as for the fire, that's going to require a bit more work. He followed the stream till it met with a mighty river. The sight of the river destroyed any hope that he was just in the forbidden forest. The river that ran through it wasn't this wide. He adjusted the makeshift skin bag full of boar meat. If it spoiled before he got the chance to eat it, it was no great loss. He didn't have the fire, so in effect he had nothing except a loincloth. He was never going to live this down. If he ever got back to Hogwarts, he was going to find a spell that would replace his clothes and hope that the next time he got kidnapped or whatever, he would be able to cast the spell with or without a wand. Until I can find a way to make fire without matches or magic, I'm going to have to just see if I can survive on berries and nuts, said Harry, wrapping a long piece of vine around his middle, holding the draped hide across himself like a toga. The hide was scratchy and not the best cloth or fur he had ever felt, but it was all he had. He set out walking towards the setting sun, munching on the blackberries he had plucked from the bush in the clearing. Harry stretched out on the soft grass in an open meadow near the road he had just found and had traveled a bit on. He had been heading east for the past 3 days, trying to find a way back, or at least someone else who lived in the area. He came to the conclusion that he wasn't in the Forbidden Forest or anywhere near Hogwarts, especially with the river and whole boar thing. Hermione said something about boars unable to stand magic and that they keep away. He could have misheard her, though. He and Ron were in a bit of a contest who could eat the most ham sandwiches. Harry lost big time. Ron couldn't seem to move his body away from the table without a levitation charm's help. Over the course of those 3 days, his staff handling got a little better, and the staff itself became a bit more polished up. Fire was still a chore for him to do, though. It took him forever to get the 2 stones to spark and get a good-sized fire going. But when he did, he was able to eat the boar meat he had earned the first day. He arrived in this strange place, as well as any fish he caught from a nearby stream. He pitched the boar meat as soon as he had tasted it. He wouldn't be that desperate. Though he ended up just tying a piece of vine to the spear and attaching a worm to the other end. Catching fish was easier, and they tasted a lot better. Harry smiled up at the sun. The clouds passed over him slowly and gently covered his body with their gentle shadows. Harry yawned and prepared to take a short nap. This isn't so bad. Sort of like an adventure vacation sort of thing, said Harry as he drifted off to sleep. This is horrible, cried Sirius. What are we going to do? There's nothing we can do, said Dumbledore, tears in his eyes, except wait for Harry to awaken on his own. And give him blood-replenishing potions almost every hour on the hour, said Remus sadly. He looked down at the boy, then his eyes grew larger. You know what's strange? What's that, Remus? Asked Sirius, brushing back the bangs on Harry's head. The wounds he received while he was laying here are healing up, but not the ones he got at Hogwarts, said Remus, looking at the faint scars on Harry's body. Dumbledore quickly inspected Harry's hands, and then the ones on his body. My word, you are correct. What's the meaning of this? Said Dumbledore, a small glimmer of hope in his eyes. Maybe he's getting better, said Sirius. We can only hope, said Remus. Harry awoke from his nap by the sound of thunderous hoofs hitting the ground. He looked around, and to his shock, it was twilight. Damn, slept too long. What the heck's coming? Thought Harry to himself. As the sound grew louder and Harry could tell that whatever was coming was getting closer and closer, he heard a piercing shriek rip through the night sky. A chill shot up his spine, a cold sense of fear sliced through his body. Hide. He stood up quickly, ruffled the grass that left an imprint of his body, gathered up his meager belongings, and ran to the nearest thick, full tree. He climbed high enough to hide himself from the viewers from below, but he could see them with little trouble. Harry stayed in that tree until he saw 4 dark cloaked figures riding on black steeds, heading westward on the road he himself had just laid beside. He was stunned that he didn't need light to see the figures, especially since his glasses were long gone, and his vision had apparently been healed to the point he didn't need glasses. He watched in horror as the figures stopped near the spot he had just laid down in. They converged around the spot for a brief moment. Traveler, hissed one of the riders. He does not have it, said another. He is not important on. We must go on, said the apparent leader. They turned back towards the west and rode on. Harry watched them go and waited until the hoofbeats had faded away into nothing. He gathered up his things from the surrounding branches and climbed back down out of the tree. The moment he hit the dirt, a loud and high-pitched shriek met him. He turned and saw a single rider waiting for him in the darkness. Harry looked at him in shock, then his body gave him another order that his mind wholeheartedly agreed with. Run! He ran away from the rider, who pursued him while on his dark steed. Harry tried to lose him in the woods, but that horse could turn every corner that Harry went past. Finally, Harry came back to the swift-running river. Harry looked behind himself and saw that the horse and rider was coming quickly up to him. What he did next, he did without thinking, and he wished he had given it a bit more thought. He jumped in the river, with his staff in hand. The icy water met him, and he was welcomed into the water by a sudden cold shock ripping through his body. He tried hard to reach the surface of the water, having only learned how to swim the year prior. He wasn't very good at it. The moment his head broke, he started floundering, sputtering, and flailing about. He managed to grab onto a passing floating log and held onto it. He coughed and sputtered loudly. He then looked over to the bank where he jumped into water. The rider was still there, screeching and waving a thin, cruel-looking sword above its head. Suddenly it turned and galloped away. Suddenly, Harry's small body began to move. "Harry, are you okay?" said Sirius excitedly. Harry's body then began to convulse, and he gave several great coughs. Water poured from his mouth and dribbled down his chin. "Albus!" screamed Sirius loudly. Everyone who was downstairs for their monthly meeting came running up and crammed themselves into the room. They stared in horror as the boy began to cough and shiver. He's coughing up water," said Sirius, nearly going mad with fright. Suddenly, the water and the coughing both stopped, and Harry's breathing returned to normal. What just happened?" said Remus faintly. Harry continued to cling to the piece of driftwood and floated downstream, but with the coldness of the river, the lower part of his body was quickly becoming numb, especially as he wasn't wearing pants. Finally, he heard a shout coming the sides of the river and saw a man running alongside the river trying to keep up with the floating boy. Harry was too busy trying to keep his head afloat and not succumb to a cold sleep that he didn't hear what the man said. He only moaned and tried hard to grip tighter to the driftwood. The man dove in and swum out to the youth. "Hold on," shouted the man. Harry moaned again, but his hands began to slip until he ended up slipping completely into the river. His eyes were barely open, but he could see the man dive under to get him, though he could only see the man's shape. The man dragged him back to the surface and pulled Harry out of the water by throwing an arm around the young man's neck. On the shore, the man knelt on the grassy riverbank beside Harry, who was lying, coughing up water, and tried to rub the young man's legs furiously to get feeling back into them. Harry didn't have the strength to do it himself. The man administered to him, rubbing his larger hands and his Harry's smaller ones to get the heat back into them. He wrapped Harry up in drier clothes and started a fire to aid in the youth's endeavor to warm up. Harry turned to look up at him, all the while shivering. He had a head full of long, scruffy-looking brown hair, and the beginning of a beard to go with it. He was tall and lean, and wearing a worn, faded green tunic with brown pants and boots. Against a nearby tree, there was a long sword in sheath, pack, dagger, and a bow and quiver. The man wrapped another dry cloak around the youth. "Are you all right? You could have drowned if I hadn't come by," said the man with slight smile. "You should be more careful in the wild. What is it that you wearing?" Harry blushed as he held the cloak tighter around himself. He didn't realize the man had taken his boar hide. He didn't think he'd be this nervous when someone stumbled on him. Guess theory and real-world reaction really was different. That, and he didn't figure someone was going to strip him of his only piece of clothing. "I'm sorry, thank you for saving me, and, well..." The man looked at the discarded pelt and chuckled. "Boar hide, not very comfortable, is it?" "It gets some getting used to," said Harry, edging towards the fire. "That it does, if you can stand it at all. And you are quite welcome. I am called Strider." "What is your name?" asked Strider with a smile, as he stoked the fire. "Harry." "Harry? I've never heard of a name like that," said Strider thoughtfully. "Well, you haven't? But you're speaking English?" said Harry. "English? We're speaking common tongue," said Strider, looking at Harry with slight confusion and worry. "I think I had better get more wood for the fire. Perhaps you've become a trifle ill." He gave Harry his pack. "There is a set of clothes in there. Change into them. I will be right back. Do not stray far." Harry waited for Strider to leave to change underneath the cloaks. The trousers were big on him, and so was the shirt. The boots were beyond hope for him to try on. He had smaller feet, and he'd only trip in them, but they were dry and clean. He was grateful for them. Strider came back with a large armful of firewood and a few squirrels that he had flushed out and caught. "Here we are. You look as if you had not eaten in a while," said Strider, putting down the firewood and preparing to cook the squirrel meat on the fire. Harry watched as Strider cooked the meat over an open flame. The smell almost made him salivate. He was getting tired of wild berries, fish, and the occasional wild vegetable he felt comfortable risking his health with. Strider handed him a tin bowl of squirrel meat. Harry took a bite of it and smiled. "Are you feeling a bit better?" said Strider. "Why, yes, but I wasn't kidding about the English thing. That's what we call talking like this back home," said Harry. "And where is this?" said Strider. Harry looked at the clothes he wore and what Strider had upon his own body. The tin bowl was crudely made, and Harry took note of the sword and bow and quiver. "To be honest, I don't even know where I am now," said Harry, looking down, a thoughtful look in his eyes. "What province, or what country?" Strider looked at the boy. He wasn't built like any other young man he had come across, not of the race of men anyway. Most young men held muscle in their arms and legs and a deep tan from the sun above. He was slender, pale, and had a delicate look about as if the sternest glare could snap him in half. He could pass for half-elven in appearance if he had the ears and the strength, which he did not. The lad asked a few questions, but with every negative answer that Strider gave him, the boy looked more crestfallen. "So, you are lost," said Strider. It was not a question, but a statement. Harry nodded. "Well, I can take you to the nearby town of Bree. You can rest there for a while. I'll be patrolling the border, but I will come and see you and try and help you find a way back home," said Strider with a smile. Harry looked up at the man and smiled. "I'd appreciate that. I've had some rotten luck so far," said Harry. "Falling in the river does sound like horrible luck to me," said Strider kindly. "I didn't fall in, I jumped in," said Harry. Strider stared. "What in the Valar made you do something so foolish?" Thalar asked Harry in confusion. Strider blinked, almost stunned silent. "You really are not from around here, but perhaps we will have a history lesson later. Now what made you jump into the river?" "There is some dark-cloaked thing chasing me," said Harry. "Dark? A black rider," said Strider in shock. "You could describe him as that, yeah," said Harry. Strider stood up suddenly and began to kick dirt on the fire. "We need to go," said Strider, helping Harry to his feet. "Huh?" said Harry. "I'll take you to the road to Bree." "I need to warn the others," said Strider. The others?" asked Harry, taking his almost dried staff in hand. "I have friends that are patrolling the woods. They will need to know about the ring wraiths," said Strider. "The what?" said Harry in shock. "Come follow me," said Strider. Strider led Harry deep into the woods, taking care to not go too far ahead of the boy following him. It seemed like only a half hour when they reached the darkened road. "Here, take this road, and get off the road if you hear hoofbeats," said Strider. Harry nodded. "Go to the prancing pony and have a rest. Just tell Barleyman, the innkeeper, that I will pay for any expenses you tally up. That clasp around your neck should be proof enough for him, if he can bother to remember who I am," said Strider in a mutter. "Thanks again," said Harry with a smile. "I'll pay you back." Strider smiled. "Don't worry about that. I'll just bring a few deer back for Barleyman. That should pay back whatever you happen to do at the inn. Oh, if you notice anyone suspicious, stay far from them." "What?" said Harry. "How am I supposed to tell if they're suspicious or not?" Strider chuckled. "I suppose that is a hard thing to explain. Just don't take anyone at their word right away," said Strider. He chuckled when the lad looked him up and down. The tall man patted Harry's head. "I'll take care of what I need to, and then I'll look for you at the prancing pony." He turned and began to run down the road towards the direction of the river. Harry turned to head to Bree, but Strider called out to him, "Also, do not try and get into a fight with any goblins. With that little staff, you will not be able to defeat them. Run from them if you can," said Strider. "Goblins? There were goblins here, but they were all right, weren't they?" Harry waved, indicating that he heard and walked down his own path. So he had made one friend at the very least. Now to try and get to Bree, hopefully getting home, would be easy. It felt like forever just to get to the large gate of Bree. He jumped at the least little noise, trying to heed Strider's warning about keeping away from horsemen and goblins. Though the most that he had to worry about all the way to the giant wooden gate of the first town he had come across was the occasional screech owl that flapped in front of him, catching an unsuspecting shrew. He looked around nervously as he neared the gate. There was another road that ran alongside the gated entrance. He hid behind a tree, looked up and down the dark road, and bolted to the door. The door didn't open when he pushed it, and it didn't have a handle to pull. it seemed he would have to knock. He knocked on the large door, hoping someone in the town would hear him, or he'd have to sleep outside for one more night. Since he had found himself, wherever he was, he didn't mind sleeping under the stars. That all changed when those Black Riders came up and scared the crap out of him. Now he wanted nothing more than to sleep somewhere where there's either a lock or a magical barrier to keep them out. Thunder began to roll above him. It was going to rain tonight. Wonderful. From the looks of the gate, it was far from magical, but there had to be something keeping those things out. Suddenly, a wizened old face peered out of a small opening in the doorway, peering down at him.
"What do you want?" asked the man gruffly.
"I want to get to the inn, Prancing Pony," said Harry, looking up and down the road carefully. The old man snorted. "What business do you have in there?" asked the gatekeeper. Harry blinked. "I don't want to sleep outside," said Harry slowly. Harry didn't figure that it would take a bit of convincing just to get inside the walls, and Harry was failing miserably. The man hiding behind the wall mentioned a couplin. He was the other gatekeeper that was on night watch. Sometimes he would let anyone in, but not he. Oh no. Harry looked like he was up to something, in his ill-fitting clothes and crudely made spear. He wasn't going to let Harry into Bree, and he was going to pass the word to the other gatekeepers to do the same when day broke. "I'm not up to anything," said Harry exasperatedly. "Look, I'm cold and hungry. Please just let me in." "You're wearing a ranger outfit. You are, and I don't recognize you. Give me one good reason to trust you. You could have robbed a ranger and stole his clothing, or even killed him. I'd surely lose my position if I let you inside and you were to go on a mad killing spree," said the gatekeeper stubbornly. "You will not set foot in Bree, my lad." Harry stared at the gatekeeper in shock. What in the world could he do in order to prove himself? The day was long gone, and he wanted to get inside the gates, just in case the riders came back. "What do I have to do in order to convince you I'm not a bad person?" said Harry desperately. The man continued to scowl, but then the scowl slowly turned into a sneer. "Well, if you want to prove to me that you're a good, resourceful lad, then you can do something for me," said the man, showing his yellowing teeth. "What is it that you want?" asked Harry warily. "If you were to prove me right and be a hardened criminal, I'd lose my position, and if I'd let you in," he said, mostly to himself as he looked to the left of the window. He then turned and faced towards Harry again. "I want you to give me enough money to last me in case I lose my job, because of you." "I don't have any money," said Harry. He didn't even know what currency this area used. It could be duck eggs for all he knew. "What's stopping me from stealing it back if I get into the town, if I am a bad person?" he thought. "Well, fortune smiles on you today. I heard there was a goblin raiding party nearby, but the local patrol stumbled on them and fought them off. As you well know, goblins tend to take pretty things, jewels and such, and bring them back to their king. The patrol didn't mention finding the loot box. Go find that, and I'll let you in. That just provide for me in case you bring about misfortune to the town." He sneered. "Are you nuts? It's dark out here. I won't be able to find anything," shouted Harry. "I don't even know which direction they were or what the box looks like." "Then you can't come in," said the gatekeeper, still sneering. Then, without another word, he slammed the door shut behind him. Harry stared at the closed door. "So much for thinking people here were as nice as Strider," he muttered with a frown. He gave the door a swift kick, earning a sharp pain in his right foot. "How the bloody hell am I supposed to find this bloody treasure?" he said darkly. "This is turning into one of Dudley's ruddy video games." He looked around into the darkness, crossing his arms. "Looks like I'm sleeping out here tonight again," said Harry. "Hopefully the other gatekeepers tomorrow aren't as insane as this guy." He made his way to one of the briar bushes, hoping to perhaps find some protective shelter in the thicket. It wouldn't keep the rain away that was threatening to come down, but perhaps it would keep him out of sight. He made to take off his coat and drape it over himself, but something caused him to stop. But suddenly he heard a faint melody on the wind, played by what sounded like ever-changing instruments. He looked around, wondering where the music was coming from. The smart and wise idea would be not to follow that sound, not with those riders and possibly goblins out here. But I really have nothing better to do with my time till morning hits, and that's ages away, and I'm going to get soaked anyway, said Harry to himself. Maybe there's someone else out here, and maybe they have a tent or something, and hopefully they'll share it with me. So he went onwards towards the music. He went into the small wooded area on the left of the road, and continued on until the music grew louder and louder. He placed small rocks in the shape of arrows to point his way back to the gate tomorrow morning in case he went too far. Once the music had grown to an immense volume, he saw a light flickering in a large clearing despite the impeding rain. A campfire had been made. A pungent smell met his nostrils, and he plugged his nose with his hand. Whatever they were cooking, he didn't want any. He entered a large clearing, but the coast was far from clear. There were 5 creatures huddled around a small fire, cooking what looked like a human leg. He looked over to another figure, a man tied to a tree, gagged with a dark leather-like fabric. He saw, to his horror, another creature, much like the ones tasting the leg, roasting over the fire, pressing a burning brand into the man's bloody stump and staunching the flow of blood, the dark leather fabric cutting off the man's painful howling. Man looked seconds away from fainting. The creatures were horribly twisted and ugly-looking. They had scraggy-looking clothing and what appeared to be odd-looking metal earrings in their faces. Their mouths were black and their teeth jagged and edged like a shark. They were fighting over the cooking stump, licking the flesh and slicing off chunks of it. Are these goblins? But they don't look anything like them, thought Harry in horror. One of the goblins looked up over to Harry and gave a screech, causing the others to look round as well. They gathered their weapons and leaped over to the boy, poised to strike. Harry tightened his grip on his spear and brought the butt end of it up into the first goblin's chin, causing him to land hard on the ground, and there it staggered to its feet once again. Something strange had happened during that first goblin's attack, and it still was happening. They were rushing towards him, but sluggishly he was able to deflect their attacks and strike faster at them than they could. It was as if someone had turned on a slow-motion tape of goblins fighting while he himself seemed to move normally. A second one came and swung its machete-looking dagger down a millimeter from where Harry's nose was. Harry dodged out of the way and slammed the spear into the side of the goblin's head. The third goblin looked warily at Harry, as if frightened by the speed that Harry was fighting. Harry turned and faced the goblin and raised his spear, ready to strike. The goblin gave a screech, turned, and ran. The other followed close behind. Time began to speed up again, back to normal. Harry pulled his arm back and prepared to throw the spear into the goblin's back, but he stopped. Slowly he lowered the spear to his side. Then he heard a muffled moan. He looked round quickly. He remembered the man and thought he needed more attention than the goblins. Harry hurried over to the man and cut his bonds and gag with the tip of his spear. The man coughed, sputtered, and clutched at his burned and bloodied leg, his hands shaking and his face pale. "Urgh," moaned the man in pain. He collapsed heavily into the bark of the tree. "Easy. You'll be okay, I think," said Harry, throwing his coat over the man. "Why didn't you kill him?" he gasped out weakly. "Why did you let them go?" "I think I'm lucky enough to be able to knock them out, to be perfectly honest. Killing them. There was no need. They were running away," said Harry, trying to help the unfortunate man to his feet. He handed the man his staff, so he didn't have to put all his weight on the young man, but had to awkwardly help him upright as he picked up a crude-looking pack. "To be foolish," gasped the man. "It's best to kill them before they can harm someone else," said the man thickly.
Harry didn't answer. Instead, he took another conversational path as he followed the path of stones he had laid down on the ground, noticing how strange it was that the music, as it once was quiet, further away from the clearing, was still the same volume as it was back where the goblins were. Even stranger as there was no musical instruments in the clearing with them. "How did they catch you like that, anyway?" asked Harry, hoping to learn what not to do in the future, when walking around in the wild, following strange music was becoming one of the rules.
"I was merely heading into Bree to sell my wares. I'm a potter," said the man, trying to stifle a scream as a painful throb ripped through his body. Harry held back a "me too." Harry gave the man a moment to rest against a nearby tree. The man had to be in intense pain, but he needed a healer. "Doctor, whatever the hell they had here. Could you help me into Bree? I'll give you something in return," he said, trying to convince Harry to help him, though he didn't know he wouldn't have to waste his precious breath. Harry had no choice but to get the man some help. Without some help soon, the man wouldn't last much longer. "Sure, no problem. You don't need to give me anything, but getting inside might be a bit of a chore. I'm not allowed in until I give the gatekeeper a loot box of some kind. But that's what I wanted to give you. I stumbled on it on my way here, but it seems they too were trying to find it," said the man urgently. This really is one of Dudley's damn video games? He handed Harry the pack. We'll look into this later, once we get to the gate, said Harry. Take what you want first. If the gatekeeper only gets a coin or two, he'll never know, said the injured man, beginning to gasp and pant. Please, take what you want from the box. If you don't take it out now, you won't find the time to get anything. I don't want anything, said Harry as he opened the pack. Inside were a few cruel knives and some pieces of rotting meat, but something else caught his eye. There was a jaggedly carved box inside the pack, and when his hand touched it, he could feel the vibrations of the melody that hung in the air pulse through his body. This is it, he said, picking up the small box. This is the bloody treasure? I guess I should be thankful to that small box for my rescue, said the man, gritting his teeth. If you hadn't been asked to look for it, I would have been devoured by those damnable creatures. All right, sorry about that. Hang on. He made to heave the man upright, but the box suddenly grew hot in his hand. What the hell, said Harry, as the box began to glow, as well. Out of curiosity, Harry opened the chest. Inside were a bunch of coins, some jewels, and something that caught Harry's attention immediately. It was a glistening opal, not the biggest jewel in the box. In fact, it was one of the smaller ones, but something about it registered in his mind as to what he didn't know. But he pocketed that lonely jewel. Why not take more? Asked the man, his voice barely above a whisper now. You've earned more than that. I know, but we need to get into Bree, and he won't let me in without paying him off, said Harry, shrugging as best he could under the weight. I'll just take that one stone. Paying off what? Asked the man. Never mind, said Harry. They managed to make it back to the gatekeeper, and it took several knocks on the door for him to even peer out of the little window. What do you want? He asked sourly. I've got someone who needs help, said Harry quickly, and when he noticed the man made no sudden movements, he sighed. And I've got the stupid box. Immediately, the door opened. Show me, he said quickly. No, you let us in first, said Harry sternly as he gripped the box tighter. The man grumbled loudly but allowed them to pass. As soon as the gatekeeper opened the door, Harry helped the one-legged man inside and shoved the box into the man's hands. Take it, he snarled and helped the man into the main drag of the town. You didn't tell him you took something out, said the man with a strained smile. He'll never know, and he sure isn't the original owner of the jewels and coins anyway, said Harry with a smirk. And he owes me for giving me grief. You don't sound sad, said the injured man. Never mind, do you know where there's a healer or something? Asked Harry, continuously lugging him around. Take me to the inn, they'll fetch one, said the man, still gritting his teeth. You're tougher than me. I'd be screaming if I lost my leg, said Harry, looking down at the still smoking stump. Which inn? The prancing pony, said the man. I was heading there myself, said Harry with a grim smile. The man gave a strained chuckle. Fortune smiles on the both of us. Suddenly he pointed to a building with a sign that said Prancing Pony. It even had a horse carved into the wood of the sign. In there, it's the best one in town, he wheezed. Harry could feel it. The man was quickly losing his strength. Harry opened the door quickly and headed up to the counter, where a large man with a bushy mustache stood there. Can you help him? Said Harry, sweat pouring off his face from the strain. The man looked down and saw the burnt stump that the injured man had acquired and ushered them quickly into an adjoining room. The innkeeper laid the unfortunate man down on the bed in that room and wrapped his leg in bandages. He sent one of his employees off to fetch the healer. Harry sat towards the back of the room, keeping safely out of the way, fingering the opal in his hand. About an hour after the healer had arrived, a barkeep walked over to him. He's going to be confined to a bed for a good long while, but the healer says he should be able to make a full recovery. If you had been just a few minutes late, he wouldn't have half the chance he has now, said the barkeep. Bremen told me what you did for him. You're a brave young man for going to save him. If you want, you can have a night's stay here for free, said the man with a smile. Barrowman's my name. Harry blinked. Thanks, Barrowman, but, why would you give me a free night's stay? I didn't help you, said Harry. Remen's my wife's brother. So you did do my family a favor, said Barrowman with a smile. Oh, well, I need a job. Do you have anything? Said Harry. I'm not from around here, and I think I'd better settle down somewhere till I find out what the heck I'm supposed to do. Heck? Said Barleyman, slowly. It's something we say where I come from, said Harry quickly. Oh, you live far away? Said Barleyman curiously. Yeah, said Harry. And you can't figure out how to get back, he said, not really believing the young man. No, I'm gonna need some help from, well, someone exceptionally wise. Harry didn't want to say wizard or witch, not knowing if this place had such people. Oh, I know someone like that goes by the name of Gandalf, wizard, he is, said Barely Man. Harry's eyes flashed with excitement. Where is he? Where can I find him? He said quickly. Well, he hasn't been around 5 months or so. He'll pop up, said Barely Man. As for a job, well, I need someone to be our cook. Ours sort of passed away. She was a spry old girl, said Barely Man, rubbing his chin. Can you cook? Yes, sir, I can. I've cooked for my family for several years, said Harry. I'll take a shot at it. Huh? Asked Barely Man. Never mind, said Harry. Oh, well, good. I can give you room and board for your services. If you do a good job, I'll give you some coins to get whatever else you may need, said Barely Man kindly. I really appreciate it. Do you want me to start tonight? Said Harry. No, you've done enough tonight. Best give you the night off. You start tomorrow, said Barely Man, with a kind smile. I'll also get that box that you gave to the gatekeeper for you. If he's taking bribes to let people into the town, we sure don't want him guarding the door. Harry woke up refreshed in his newly attained room. It was a little small, but compared to his old cupboard and the room he had at the Dursleys, it was a suite. There was a good-sized bed, a trunk at the foot of the bed, a pitcher of water, and a bowl on a small table to wash his face in. He yawned hugely and put the clothes that Strider had so kindly had given him back on. He had slight trouble trying to remember how the tunic was supposed to be tightened up, but he managed to get it in the end. He happened to notice also that there were a pair of simple boots beside his bed, much smaller than the large ones he had borrowed from Strider. The innkeeper must have given me these. That was nice of him, but geez, they're hard to lace up. I thought dress robes were hard. These things make those look easy, thought Harry as he fumbled with the laces. He leaned out of the window and saw the sun creeping up over the horizon. He didn't hear anyone outside stirring, so it still had to be pretty early in the morning, too early for most people. He went carefully downstairs, so as to not disturb anyone from their restful sleep. He headed downstairs to find the kitchen. He saw a large, spacious barroom with several tables with chairs and large booths around the walls of the room. The room looked reasonably clean, but well lived in. No wonder the man from last night said this place was the best. It felt like another home in here. He went down a small hall and through a pair of swinging doors to find the kitchen. He looked around the modern appliance-deprived kitchen and noticed that the stove was nothing that he was used to back home. It was beyond antique. He remembered reading in primary school about how people way back in time managed to cook, so he had some idea and he hoped he didn't set anything on fire. He grabbed some firewood from the small bucket beside the stove and tossed it inside. After he managed to get the stove going, fixing it so he didn't have large amounts of smoke belching out, he had to push open the upper part of the split door to get rid of the smoke. He looked around quickly and saw a young boy come knocking on the still closed part of the door with several large baskets full of eggs and different vegetables. "Here's your food," said the young man, holding up the large baskets. "Oh, thanks, but I don't have any," said Harry. "Money, sir," said the young boy helpfully. "Yeah, I just started here last night," said Harry apologetically. "Mr. Butterbur has a tab at our stand, sir. He pays for it every week," said the small boy, grinning hugely. "Oh, well. All right, then, I don't have a tip for you this morning, but the next time you deliver, I'll try and have something made for you," said Harry. "Thank you, sir," said the small boy with a bright smile, and then left. "Sir?" thought Harry with a smirk. "I'm maybe 3 years older than you." He grabbed the pots and pans and placed them on the now hot stove. He cracked several eggs and fried them up on the pan, and tossed a few rashers of bacon in for good measure. While that was going on, he decided to make a few old-fashioned muffins that Uncle Vernon's old boss used to love. Thankfully, Harry never needed a muffin pan in order for the muffins to raise the way he wanted them, only because Dudley sat on all the ones Aunt Petunia had and disfigured them. But it did take him several months in order to get them the shape he wanted. All it took was a little ingenuity and a bit of bendable metal. Now he had it down to an absolute science. Barlaman Butterbur was snoring in his bed upstairs. Suddenly he began to have dreams full of eggs, bacon, ham, toasted bread, and something that smelled like cooked blueberries. He jerked awake and began hoping that the delicious smell hadn't just existed in his dream. He was happy to smell the same smell in the real world and changed quickly. Then he headed downstairs. He entered the kitchen quickly and found the young man he had just hired working very hard making breakfast for the guests at the inn. "Morning, Mr. Butterbur. What can I get for you?" said Harry, taking a large amount of muffins out of the oven. Harry smiled as the man stared hungrily at the very ample breakfast that laid before him. Suddenly they saw one of the younger barmaids that worked at the inn stick her head in. "Mr. Butterbur, I've got people here wanting breakfast," she said meekly. Then she saw Harry blink slowly and then quickly blushed. "Come on in and get it. Or do you take orders?" he asked Mr. Butterbur. No, we serve whatever we have on hand," said Barleyman, looking up from the muffins sitting on the table. "Well then, Harry looked at the... "Anya," said the barmaid shyly. "Well, Anya, I'll set up the plates, you take 'em out," said Harry with a smile. About an hour later, Harry was helping the scullery maid wash the dishes when a large man came stomping in, his nose stuck in the air with superiority and smugness. It took everything Harry had not to send a pea flying up it with a spoon. "You the vagabond that made my breakfast," said the man's smug voice. "No," said Harry, not looking at the man. It was too early in the morning to be overly pleasant to someone that wanted to be a complete prick. "No? What do you mean, no?" asked the man shortly. "I didn't make your breakfast. I made everyone's breakfast. Not just yours," said Harry with a smirk. The man snorted with disgust. "Best keep that tongue in check, boy. If you want to get ahead in life, I might not just offer you a better job." "Oh, really?" said Harry, drying his hands on a rag and turning to face him. "Ah, changed your tune, have you?" said the man with a smirk. "I'll give you a silver penny per day if you come and cook for me." "What a generous offer," smirked Harry as he put the rag down. He didn't know much about the economy or money exchange, but frankly, Mr. Barleyman was going to handle his room and board, give him a few gold coins for spending money. A silver penny a day wasn't much. Besides, Strider, the only other person that he had met in the place, told him to stay here. "Come along then," said the man, turning on his heel. "I never said that I would come with you," said Harry quickly. "Well, you'd be a fool not to," said the man with a smirk, turning to face the youth. "I'd be a fool to take the job, I think," said Harry. "I'm declining your offer. Please leave my kitchen." The man's face turned a sickeningly familiar purple and stormed off. Harry shook the vision of his uncle's angered face out of his mind and continued on with his work. Anya had watched what had transpired from another door leading into kitchen. Anya was happy for the green-eyed man in the kitchen when his breakfast was devoured greedily by the numerous people who had smelled the wafting scent of the muffins, eggs, and bacon. It didn't matter if they were guests at the inn or they were mulling about outside. They sniffed the air and came right in, ordering a plate of breakfast for themselves. Mr. Butterbur hadn't seen this much interest in the food of the inn for a while, and you couldn't believe how drawn she was to the strange young man. His fair skin that reminded her of the time she had seen an elf for the first time, but his skin was slightly darker, his wild, dark, black hair that stuck up in several places, and his eyes, his brilliant green eyes, she could hardly look at them without blushing. His eyes, they didn't match how young he was. They appeared to be the same age, but his eyes held a sort of tortured wisdom about them. She was happy to see that the fat old brute Bill Ferny was put in his place by someone of their generation. He was such a loudmouth bully that anyone that managed to get one over on him was considered a hero by quite a few people in town. So far, only the wizard Gandalf and the ranger Strider seemed to put him in his place. She loved watching now all three of them give Bill Ferny a piece of their mind, but she had to ditch and run quickly and hide whenever Mr. Butterbur would come around. She didn't want to be punished for spending more time watching the green-eyed man than on the guests. But the innkeeper was well aware of the young woman's desire to watch the youth. He knew she was smitten with the lad, and he wasn't too upset by it. The boy seemed like the sort that would wander off at the drop of a hat, and Anya being the prettiest girl in Bree, he wouldn't wander too far if the lad was like any normal young man. If he happened to notice her aspiring affections, if she couldn't get him to stay, nothing would. So he didn't do anything to deter the romance that was sure to follow. Harry had worked at the Prancing Pony for 3 weeks, keeping the people of Bree happily fed and introducing them slowly to different sorts of culinary treats. Anya had tried several times to drag Harry out of the kitchen and out on an outing, but Harry wouldn't go anywhere. If he wasn't in the kitchen, keeping tabs on his earnings, including the jewels and money from the goblin loot box, or out in the market, finding new ingredients, chatting with a few of the more exotic-looking guests, he was looking at the opal he had gotten from the small box on his first night in Bree. Something about the jewel resonated deep within his heart. It was as if he could hear a small voice trying to call out to him from within. Unbeknownst to anyone at the Prancing Pony, he had gone outside of the protective wooden walls and took on bandits and stray goblins. His fighting skills over time greatly improved. Well, improved as in the sense that he might not need luck to disarm or defeat a goblin, but that wasn't the most important thing that Harry had noticed. When Harry would take the opal with him out to a fight, time would slow down and enable him to dodge a blow that would normally not allow him to escape. When he wouldn't take it with him, he would need to be extra careful and extra vigilant. After that discovery, he decided to keep this small jewel with him at all times, lest he lose this amazing treasure. It wasn't just good for battles, it made him able to keep up with the rush of food that kept coming in almost all day long.
How did this stone work? What made this stone do what it does? Where did this stone come from? So many questions. Now all he needed was the answers. But first things come first. He had to find a way home. When the heck was Gandalf gonna get there? He was taking a break one day in the kitchen and gazed at the shimmering jewel in his hand. Anya came in and saw Harry sitting on the stool, staring at his hand. "Did you cut yourself, Harry?" she asked, looking concerned. "No, why do you ask?" he said, looking up at her, not bothering to hide the jewel. "You're staring at your hand," she said. Harry looked down at his hand and then back to her, his brows knitted in confusion. He held it up for her to see. "Tell me what you see." She stared at him. "Just your hand doing this." She mimicked what Harry was doing. The only difference was that he was holding an opal. Harry looked at the jewel curiously and then pocketed it. "It's nothing really. What can I do for you, Anya?" he said, looking up at her. Anya blushed heavily and turned her head. "Mr. Butterbird said that you could take the rest of today off." "Another one, huh? All right, guess I'll go wander about the town then," said Harry. Anya gave a small nervous cough. I was thinking that. She fumbled with her hands nervously. Harry looked down sadly. He didn't want to do this. He had to get home. He had to be able to leave this place if he got involved with anyone. It would be just too hard, and he knew that, however he managed to get here. What was the odds that he would be able to bring her with him, and what sort of life would she have? Here it was easy, just backpedal to more primitive times. Anya, she'd have to learn a whole lot of technologies, mannerisms, and possibly a whole other way of speaking. He still said some things that they didn't understand, but he managed to explain it or phrase his words a bit more carefully. "Yena." He ran his hand over his face. "I can't." "Why not?" she said. Hurtfully, tears began to form out of her eyes, and with a sob she ran out of the door. "Anya!" shouted Harry. He chased after her. When he made it outside, he managed to see a part of her skirt turn the corner past the end. "Crud, she's faster than I am," said Harry, as he sprinted after her. He chased her throughout the town of Bree, knocking into the old gatekeeper who hurled insults at him. He had lost his station and was now a keeper at the stables. Finally, he managed to track her down towards the end of Bree, near the gate that Harry had never gone out yet. He found Anya sitting on a small bench under a large tree, weeping bitterly. Harry slowly walked towards her, then sat down next to her. "Anya," said Harry. "Why don't you like me?" she said, still crying bitterly. I like you," said Harry quickly. "I really do like you. It's just, I'm not from here." "I couldn't care less," she said. "I do care. I can't let myself. I need to get home, and I might not be able to find the strength to get back if I have to leave someone behind. I don't think I could leave," said Harry, his voice cracking. "Then don't," said Anya, wiping her eyes. "I left friends back where I came from, a sort of family, and most of all, the man that killed my parents is still back there. I won't stay here, allowing him to live another moment," said Harry, his voice cold. Anya looked at Harry in shock. "I didn't know I understand now." "Do you?" said Harry. I lost my parents, too. Mr. Barleyman was kind enough to give me work. My grandparents were killed by goblins a few years ago. After losing them, I know what that pain is like, and I could hardly stand it when it happened. I'm sorry." Tears still fell down her cheeks. Harry sighed deeply. "One of these days I'm going to have to go through that door," said Harry, pointing to the nearby exit of Bree, "and I won't be coming back, because I can't let my heart keep me a prisoner here." Wow, that was corny. I won't blame her for snickering at that. "So you have to keep your heart a prisoner instead," said Anya. Harry looked down, but said nothing. "I feel sorry for you. You need love, but you can't have it," said Anya, laying her head on his shoulder. There both of them sat for the rest of the day. Anya cried, while Harry stared into space, wondering how he was going to get home, and how he could make this parting a little easier when the time would come.
One lazy afternoon in the Prancing Pony's kitchen, Harry was taking out a large loaf of honey bread from the oven when a voice came from the doorway behind him. "Seems you made quite a stir in this town, Harry." Harry turned around and saw Strider, leaning against the doorframe and smiling. "Hey Strider, what brings you here?" said Harry, beaming back at him. It was nice seeing a familiar face. Several people came in to compliment his cooking, but this was the first familiar face he knew before coming to Bree. Though a better face would be either Remus, Dumbledore, or someone like that. He couldn't remember the last time he felt this good and relaxed. No one was out to kill him. He didn't have to keep looking over his shoulder for anyone. His mood was elevating by the minute. "I'm meeting a friend here. What about you?" said Strider, sitting down at the table. "I did not expect you to find a trade so soon." "Well, the first night I came here, I was told about a wizard named Gandalf. I thought he could help me out," said Harry with a smile.
At a village, Strider blinked, but he smiled. "I have heard tales of him too. Maybe he could help you. But like I said earlier, you've made quite the name for yourself in this area. Even travelers heading out of Bree and passing through the Shire say that if you want the best food, you need to head to the Prancing Pony."
Harry smiled softly. "I'm not all that great at cooking." "Try telling that to the people of Bree. I believe they put on 10 pounds since I've last seen them. But you haven't." He looked at Harry's still lithe frame. "I burn it off easily," said Harry quickly. "By training, I shouldn't wonder. I can tell in your arms that you've been practicing," said Strider with a smirk. "Good boy. Some of the young men in Bree are ample opponents for a boy your size," said Strider with a smile. Harry looked away at that. "Best not let your skills get dull." "I try not to. Want some lunch?" said Harry. "I managed to get quite a few fish yesterday, and I wanted to try a new recipe. Want to try it? I finally got the sauce right." Strider looked at the fish that was placed before him with a wary eye. It didn't look to be the normal fish dish he was used to. There was now something thick and white over the carved-up pieces of fish. "Don't tell me you're afraid to try something new," said Harry with a smirk, digging into his own fish. He took a bite and closed his eyes. "Yeah, I think it's about as good as I can get it. If I had the spices and roots back home, still it's not bad." Strider looked at Harry and then down at his fish. Slowly, he picked up the fork and skewered a piece of fish on it. He picked the fork up and placed it in his mouth. Suddenly, a multitude of flavors erupted in his mouth. He had to cover his mouth to stop himself from gasping and from the food to leap out of his mouth. He gulped the fish down his throat and gasped loudly. "Any chance on second helping?" Harry laughed. "You saved my life. You can have as many seconds as you want." After Strider had eaten his fill, Harry reached into his pocket. "I found something a little strange the other day. Mind giving me some advice on it?" asked Harry. "I will do what I can," said Strider with a twitch of a smile. "Can you tell me what you know about this?" He held out the tiny opal. Strider looked at his hand and picked up the opal. "What's so special about this jewel?" asked Strider. "Other than it is very beautiful." "Thank goodness you can see it. I thought for a moment I was the only one," said Harry. "No one else can see it?" said Strider quickly, looking at the stone, and then Harry. "No, not Mr. Butterbur, Bremen, or Anya. For some reason, they can't see it. I thought Bremen did, but he only saw me put my hand in the box. It came in. I am really glad you can, though," said Harry. "Any idea why no one else can see it?" "No. When Gandalf comes, you'll have to ask him," said Strider, handing the jewel back to Harry. "Have you noticed anything strange about it?" "As a matter of fact, yeah. When I have it on me, or even nearby, like a few feet, and I'm fighting goblins, or whatever they're called."
"One moment. You were battling goblins?" said Strider, his eyes slightly wider.
Yeah, said Harry uncertainly. "And you're still alive?" said Strider, looking at the youth in shock. The boy didn't look strong enough to take on someone 20 pounds heavier. How could he take on vicious, barbarically trained goblins? "It's all because of this stone. They seem to slow down, and whatever they send my way, I can dodge it easily," said Harry. "Even back home, I've never seen anything like it." Strider rubbed his grizzled chin. "Neither have I." "Interesting little bauble, though. Best keep it safe. How did you happen to come across this stone?" "It was the first night I came here. Stupid gatekeeper wanted a small box a trio of goblins were holding on to. I told him that it was dark and that I wouldn't have been able to find anything. Well, Harry thought about telling Strider about the music he had heard, but he thought better of it. It would only be a repeat of his second year, and he could live without that, thank you very much. It was a giant stroke of luck that I found those goblins, not just for me, but for Bremen. He was captured by those things, and they were... Harry looked at Strider, who was absent-mindedly picking the small pieces of fish off the plate and eating them slowly. "That part can wait till later, but I knocked out the goblins and Bremen had the box on him. He gave me the box and I found the jewel inside along with some other ones, but that one sort of attracted my attention. Strider continued to look at the jewel in Harry's hand curiously. He looked utterly baffled at what that jewel could be and what powers it could possess and why it possessed the power to slow time. It seemed Harry was not going to get his answer today. Over the course of the next few weeks, Strider took Harry out into the woods outside of Bree and trained up his fighting skills. There was no swordsmith in Bree, but Harry, with the money he had earned as the Prancing Pony's cook, he managed to buy some steel and paid a blacksmith to take the rock off and place the steel bit on the tip of the staff, making it a very deadly weapon indeed. After a very grueling workout, they leaned against a tree and drank from their small canteens deeply. "You're getting better, Harry. You're really getting better," said Strider with a slightly proud smile over at the young boy panting heavily beside him. "Do you know how annoying it is to see you not even breaking a sweat? And I'm over here dying of asphyxiation," panted Harry. "You're talking in your world speak again," said Strider with a smile. "I can't breathe," panted Harry. Well, I've been trained, and I've been fighting orcs, goblins, invaders of our borders, and trolls for many years." "You only just started," said Strider kindly. "Come on, let's go again. This time, don't let me trip you." It was almost sunset when they both came back into the walls of Bree. They would have continued, but Harry had to go back to the Prancing Pony to make dinner. "What's for dinner tonight, Harry?" said Strider. "Let me think. I have quite a bit of chicken from the butcher's. I haven't made anything from chicken lately," said Harry, rubbing his shoulder. "I don't think I have the strength in my arms to try anything really adventurous." Later on that night, Harry, after making a very ample dinner, came out into the public area of the Prancing Pony and looked around. He saw Strider now donning a dark traveling cloak and hood with his pipe sitting out of the dark hood, smoke spiraling languidly out of the hole. He looked quite menacing, more so than normal. Strider seemed to have a touch of dramatics in him when he wanted to be frightening to any newcomers to the inn. He was about to go over and tell him how scary he seemed to look, but saw the look in his eyes. They were cold and fixed towards someone over to the other side of the room. Harry followed his eyes and saw a table of 4 children drinking ale. Harry was in shock. And it wasn't until he saw 2 of the 4 children pick up a pipe and put it to his lips that he hurriedly made his way over to their table. Before he could reach them, he ran into Mr. Butterbur. "Well, Harry, we don't rightly see you come out here. What seems to be the matter?" said Mr. Butter with a smile. "Those kids," said Harry, pointing to the 4 at the table. "Kids? There are no goats in here, are there?" "Oh, you said once that means children too. What children?" asked Mr. Butterbur. He turned and looked at the table. Harry pointed to. "Oh, those aren't kids. Those are hobbits." "Hobbits?" said Harry, stunned. "What the heck is a hobbit?" "Well, they're just a smaller version of us, just with curly hair on their feet," said Mr. Butterbur plainly. "They're decent folk. Real laughs. Come on, I'll introduce you." He took Harry by the elbow and pulled him towards the table. 2 of the 4 hobbits looked up, startled, but the other 2 were smiling up at the pair standing beside the table. "Good evening, little masters. I'd like you to meet our cook, Harry. He's new to these parts." The 2 that were smiling pointed at their plates. "You made dinner?" "Yes, I did," said Harry. "Did you enjoy it?" "It was delicious," said the 2 of them together. Harry noticed the other 2 hobbits stared at him in wonder and what looked like apprehension. The brown-haired one. He seemed a little worn, while the other one looked at him suspiciously. Suddenly, Harry was grabbed by his elbow and dragged to the center of the floor. He looked behind himself and saw the butcher, drunk off his ass. "Come on, Harry, sing a song from your homeland," he said, drinking from his tankard deeply. Cheers came rising from all around the pub. "You wouldn't like the songs from my country," said Harry, raising his hands. "Come on, Harry. I'll ask Mr. Underhill to sing if you will. Hobbit songs aren't a thing to miss," said Mr. Butterbur, clapping his hands. Harry groaned and rubbed his eyes. He looked helplessly over to Strider, but to his dismay, he saw him with small smile on his face. Great. He wasn't going to get any help from him, or Anya. He noticed that she stopped dead in her tracks, with a load of glasses on her tray. What was he going to do? He'd have to sing now. But what was he going to sing? Rock and roll. His voice couldn't handle all that yelling and shouting. Pop? They'd never understand it. And from what he saw on their beliefs, they'd lynch him for how most of the songs go. country, they would never have the faintest idea what a tractor or pickup truck would be. Show tunes? That's the safest route to take. Now which one? Come on, boy, let's hear you sing, said Mr. Butterbur. What are you gonna sing? Well, it's an old song, a really old song, said Harry, thinking of a song quickly. Well, from where I come from, it is. What's it called? Said Mr. Butterbur. It's called Whistle Down the Wind, said Harry, and wishing to get it over with as soon as possible. Sorry if I sound horrible. You won't, said a small voice somewhere in the pub. Harry noticed Anya turned bright red. He sighed deeply, and then he sang. The entire pub went silent. Strider himself was staring at the young man in disbelief. This was music where he came from. It sounded so soft, like a bird song. Then it switched to the melody of a wolf's howl, then back to a bird's serene chorus. And Harry thought he would sound terrible? Who lied to this lad? The minstrel in the back of the pub looked at Harry in awe. He didn't have the faintest idea how the song was to be played. But Harry didn't need the help, really. When he was done, the pub erupted into a staggering applause. Harry smiled sheepishly and scratched the back of his head. Can I sit down now? Said Harry with a smile. Sure you won't sing again? Said Mr. Butterbur. Absolutely not, said Harry, and he went to go sit at the bar. I'll have my usual. What do you drink? Asked one of the hobbits coming up to the bar, asking for a pint of ale. I've got some money, I'll buy. Apple cider? Said Harry. Apple cider? Said the hobbit. Yep, it's that extra vitamin C that gives it the kick, said Harry with a smile. What's vitamin C? Asked the hobbit. Never mind, said Harry. I'm not old enough for ale or beer for that matter, said Harry as he drank from his own tankard. How old are you? Asked the hobbit. Well, adding up the time I've been here, I'm still 15, going on 16, said Harry. Wow, and they let you work here, said the hobbit. Never asked, never told, said Harry, taking a drink again. Good idea. By the way, Peregrine Took is my name, but everyone calls me Pippin, said the hobbit, holding out his hand. Harold Potter, but you can call me Harry, said Harry with a smile, and shaking hands with Pippin. Harold? Said Anya, with a bright smile. It sounds so exotic. Not where I come from. It's pretty common, said Harry. Anya and Pippin are much more exotic and rare than mine is. Anya smiled shyly. Pippin laughed. You should meet my cousin right over there, Frodo Baggins. He's my second cousin, once removed on his mother's side, said Pippin, turning and pointing to the hobbit, with the worn look, which then turned into panic. Baggins? I thought Mr. Butterbur said his name was Underhill, said Harry quietly. Suddenly, Mr. Underhill, or as it turned out to be, Mr. Baggins hurried over and took Pippin by the shoulder. Pippin turned quickly, and that knocked Frodo off balance, and toppled backwards. Harry noticed a small band of gold fly into the air and then fall onto one of Frodo's outstretched fingers. Suddenly, Frodo vanished. Harry stared at the floor in shock. Then the noise of frightened and shocked patrons grew larger and larger. Harry reached down and felt the small hobbit's leg. He moved his hand up and felt the small ring on the hobbit's hand and tried to take it off. But he was sent flying backwards into the wall. His head slammed into the wall, and he slumped onto the floor as stars blinked in front of his eyes. Anya came over to see if Harry was all right and helped him to his feet. Harry scrambled back over to the hobbit, and he met Strider rushing over to the spot that held an invisible Frodo Baggins. Without warning, Frodo came back into view and was promptly dragged out of the room by Strider. They turned into the corridor, making sure no one was following. Strider made to go up the stairs, but Harry stopped him. Kitchens are closer, Strider. Only Butterbur and I have the keys when that doors are locked. And the walls are thicker. No one can hear us, said Harry. Good idea, your instincts are getting better, whispered Strider. They half-dragged, half-carried Frodo down to the kitchens and closed the door behind him. Aren't you gonna lock it? Said Strider quietly. Not if his friends want in. I won't. After they come in, then I'll lock it, said Harry. Want to, the both of you want? Said Frodo, sounding worried as he watched the two taller people watching the door, and locking the door to outdoors. You'd best be more careful, Mr. Baggins. That's no mere trinket you carry, hissed Strider. I don't know what you're talking about, said Frodo, and my name is Mr. Underhill. It won't matter what you call yourself. They already know who you are and what you carry, said Strider shortly. You mean those riders? Said Harry quickly. Then a cascade of footprints came towards the kitchen door. The door crashed open, and there were the other 3 hobbits. 2 had a chair lifted above their heads, and the other one looked like he was ready to go. 10 rounds in a boxing ring. Let him go, or I'll have you, Longshanks, said the sandy-haired one. What about me? Said Harry, pretending to be hurt. I trust you, said Pippin, not taking his eyes off Strider and not lowering his makeshift weapon. You didn't drag Frodo in here. Strider rolled his eyes, then looked at the sandy-haired hobbit. You have a stout heart, but that won't save you. Harry locked the door as he ushered the hobbits into the kitchen. Those Black Riders are coming, aren't they? Said Harry, as he removed the chairs from the two smaller hobbits. They are. One person in there, said Strider, pointing towards where the pub was. We'll have told the enemy where to find you. We need somewhere to hide until it is safe to leave Bree. Harry thought quickly. There's false wall back here, said Harry, moving swiftly amongst the people in the kitchen. He felt around the western wall and stopped. He felt the small grooves in the wall he was looking for and pulled it out. Inside was a small stove, a few blankets, pillows, a dark stone-patterned plank covering the lone window. There was a removable knothole in the wood to see out into the street. Found it on accident. I was just putzing around, said Harry. What? Asked Strider. Messing around. Strider still looked confused. Goofing off, said Harry, trying to explain what he meant. Strider's face did not change. Exploring the kitchen to the fullest extent, without any real reason behind it, said Harry. Ah, said Strider, smiling. Then he looked at the door that was sliding open. I know of this room. This pub used to be a safe haven for us Rangers, but only during the time that Barleyman's father was the owner of the Prancing Pony, said Strider. Then a knocking came from behind the locked door. They all tensed up and stared at it. Strider even unsheathed his sword a part of the way. Harry and Strider hurried over to the door, and through a small peephole, Harry saw that it was both Mr. Butterbur and Anya. He opened the door carefully. Harry, what's going on? Said Mr. Butterbur. What happened to that Mr. Underhill? Then he saw Frodo half and half out of the secret room. He pointed his mouth, opening and closing it. They're in danger. I thought I'd hide them in there, said Harry. Hide them from what? And how did he disappear like that? Said Mr. Butterbur. The second question I won't answer, but the first I can, said Strider. Their pursuers come from Mordor. Save us, said Mr. Butterbur faintly. Anya fainted. Harry managed to catch her and placed her gently in a chair beside the fire. They won't stay here once I'm gone, said Frodo. Well, you know your own business, maybe, but I wouldn't take up with a ranger just out of the wild, said Mr. Butterbur. They have no choice, said Strider shortly, unless they want a fat innkeeper that only can remember his name because people shout at him all day. Harry looked between the two feuding men. Finally, after they resumed bickering, he had had enough. All right, stop this arguing. Mr. Butterbur, please trust him. We all don't have much of a choice. And anyway, you sort of owe him, said Harry. What do you mean that I owe him? Said Mr. Butterbur shortly. If it weren't for Strider, I would never have lived long enough to see Bree, said Harry with a frown. Mr. Butterbur stuttered but fell silent. And Strider insulting him is only going to waste time, and he's providing the hiding space. Come on, let's get these guys in the secret room. Mr. Butterbur, get Anya back home. It's not safe for her here. I'll go upstairs with a tray of food. I'll make it look like they're upstairs. I'll set up some decoys up there, just in case, said Harry, grabbing a tray and loading it with bread, ale, fruit, and cheese. Then he hurried out of the door. Mr. Butterbur and Strider stared at the young man as he left the kitchen. Hours later, Harry, Strider, Pippin, Frodo, and other two hobbits, Harry and Strider, learned their names were Sam and Mary, quietly hid in the secret room in the kitchen. While the hobbits slept, Harry and Strider sat and listened intently to the sounds emanating around the inn. Then a shriek pierced the night's death like silence. The hobbits woke up quickly. What are they? Asked Frodo quietly. They are called the Nazgul, said Strider. Neither living nor dead. They serve the Dark Lord Sauron. They hunt for one ring. The ring Frodo you now have. Why does he want the ring Frodo has? Asked Harry. For the rest of the night, Strider told Harry. The hobbits had gone back to sleep, for Frodo and Sam had already heard the story, and Merry and Pippin had heard it from Frodo, all about the legend of the One Ring and its Dark Master. Crap, said Harry, shaking his head, ignoring Strider's confused look. Your Dark Lord sounds 30 times more worse than ours. There's another one, said Strider, in surprise. Back where I come from, but he's pretty tame compared to yours. The war we're fighting is on a much smaller scale, said Harry. So your Dark Lord, how are you going to go about to get rid of him? We need that ring, and we must cast it into the fires of Mount Doom, said Strider. Problem is that Mount Doom is in the heart of Mordor. It will be no easy task. It never is, said Harry. The next morning, Harry, Strider, Merry, Pippin, Sam, and Frodo gathered supplies to leave Bree. Harry told Mr. Butterbur that he was leaving with a small band. "I've got to find a way back home somehow, sir." "And Strider told me last night that he could take me to see Gandalf," said Harry. "I understand," said Mr. Butterbur, looking shocked and slightly saddened. "Let me tell you one thing, lad. You were one of the best cooks I've ever had. I don't know what we're going to do without you." Harry could tell the man was trying not to cry in front of him as he handed Harry a pack of extra food and even some newer clothes. It seemed he had been preparing for this day. "Thank you, sir, and you don't need to worry about anything." He took out a small leather-bound book. "I wrote down all the recipes that I used here, and a few I came up with," said Harry with a smile. "The new cook will be able to make your favorite muffins."
Mr. Butterbur took the book gently. A few tears fell down his chubby cheeks. "Thanks, lad. Now you be careful, and try and come back someday."
"I'll try, but I really can't promise anything," said Harry with a smile. They loaded up the pony that they had bought from the cantankerous Bill Ferny and headed out towards the gate leading into the east. "Harry!" came a yell from behind them. Harry turned around and suddenly he found Anya throwing her arms around his neck. "Where are you going? What happened last night?" "I'm leaving," said Harry, not meeting her eyes. "What? Now?" "But," said Anya, tears in her eyes, "it's the only way I can get home, and I want to help Strider, and then," said Harry, nodding towards the hobbits. He didn't notice them, averting their gaze elsewhere to give them both privacy. Strider was making doubly sure that all their supplies were all there, not looking at either of them. Without warning, Anya kissed him fiercely. Harry's eyes widened in shock, but then against his will, his eyes closed, and he kissed her back. Thinking about it again, it wasn't against his will. He ran his fingers through her blonde hair and held her around her small waist with his free arm. When they pulled apart, Anya saw a sad look in his eyes. "You just made it really hard to go back home," said Harry in a whisper. "Then don't go," said Anya. I have to at least try," said Harry. "Come on, Harry, we have to go," said Strider. Anya released her hold on Harry and watched him slowly walk out of the gate. She looked down at her dress and saw a small envelope in the pocket of her apron. She opened the envelope and found inside a letter. "Dear Anya, if you get this letter, that means that I'm leaving now. I want you to know, whatever happens, I'll never forget the time I've spent here. I will miss you. Maybe someday I'll come back this way again. But I ask, for your sake, don't wait for me. I want you to be happy. In my room under the floorboard that I've marked with a lighting bolt, I've left a present for you. It took me a while to make it, but I hope you'll enjoy it. Yours truly, Harry." Anya watched as the gatekeepers closed the gates. Then after Mr. Butterbur escorted her back to the prancing pony, she walked slowly up to where Harry had slept and sat on his bed. She sniffed and began to cry. He was here, and now he was gone. Probably never to come back. What was she going to do? Suddenly she looked down and saw a lightning bolt scratched onto the wood of the floor. She thought back to the note and slowly moved the plank. Underneath was a small satchel and a box. Inside the bag was a small amount of gold coins. It was half of his pay that he had earned here, and most of the jewels from the goblin loot box. And then she looked at the box. It had carvings on the top and on the side. It was not expertly made like some of the dwarven things she had seen, but it was pretty. This must have been what Harry and that one dwarven guest were working on when she saw them huddled over a table. When she opened it, it played a soft tune, and after a while she recognized it as a bit of the song he sang in the pub the night prior. She held the box close to her chest and wept.